So I've always had the fondness for like sci-fi or like fantasy, and that can be seen a lot with my VRChat worlds. They're usually fantasy or sci-fi. I think I've probably done too much sci-fi. I've got another sci-fi world project in the works. After that, I'll want to jump to fantasy a bit. In a way, everything is tied to this world now, so like they're all relevant to the history of this world because they've impacted it in some way. But yeah, I've had to like include all that into it as well. So yeah, it's up. To me, the amount of people that get to experience my world is more important than the sort of financial gain I get out of it. So in terms of what I how to be remembered by, I guess it's just the kind of worlds I make. Like as long as people remember the worlds, I'm happy. That's pretty much it. It's pretty simple, but yeah. I don't see an end. So as long as the tools are there for me to make worlds, as long as it doesn't get too complex, I should be fine. Like just making those. I've got such a long list of things to make. So yeah, hopefully I don't stop.
This video isn't just about a new game that's launching on VRChat soon. It's about having a dream, a goal, and not letting go of that goal for years. It's about being painfully honest about your skills and making the decision that you're going to do whatever it takes to make that creation the best it can be, even if you aren't totally sure about how you're going to make that happen. It's about letting go of the fear of wasted effort and time, and putting in the work because it's what you love and because you're hoping that you can inspire others to do the same along the way. Hi, I'm Tropi, and I'm so excited to finally deep dive into the mindset that created one of the most memorable initial VR experiences I had all the way back in November of 2020. Back then, I had just started VRChat. It was my first time back into gaming after being frustrated with it for years. Up to that point, most games no longer interested me and felt too limited in their capacity for immersion. I remember that years prior to this, I had seen a game trailer that really captured my imagination, but I wasn't interested in it as a flat-screen game. I wanted an immersive experience. I wondered what I would do in that game scenario, instead of what some character on the screen was almost pre-programmed to do instead. Lucky for me, I wasn't the only one who thought that game would make an amazing VR experience. That game was Shadow of the Colossus, and the VRChat world was Climbing Trials Colossus by Lakuza. This is VRChat Creator Highlights featuring Lakuza, with a focused look at the story behind his upcoming full-fledged VRChat game, Bullet Time Agent. Before we start, I should probably explain that beyond having a great time in Lakuza's world back in 2020, I didn't know him. I just really liked what he was bringing to the platform. My interactions were limited to asking stuff on social media and liking and sharing his dev updates. We collaborated in the Raindance Immersive Festival, where we both volunteered our time. And by then, I wasn't a total stranger. This is relevant because Lakuza's very understandably careful about who he works with. The reason I was able to learn so much about Bullet Time Agent is because it came up organically as part of another collaboration, and not because I had the intention of sharing any of this information. When Lakuza announced his upcoming project, Bullet Time Agent, was going to get localized, I felt like I had the chance to help support more of what I wanted to see on VRChat, so I volunteered as a Spanish translator. I wanted to give it 100% in respect for all of the hard work that he's put into this game. So I made sure to try and understand Lakuza's voice and intentions through the text. But the more we discussed design choices, timelines, and I started to understand the overall scope of this project, I started to feel like other people would really like to have this behind the scenes context. And beyond that, I wanted to see if I could better understand the mindset that it takes to keep a project going like this for so long. I was also really interested in how key people were able to keep it going and how Lakuza doubled down on his strengths while finding smart ways to circumvent challenges and limitations. I hope other people can feel inspired when they realize how much went into this and how easy it could have been to just stop early or to publish a simpler version of this game. In the end, this is what we got, and I want to share how we got here.
The artifact is worth more than this facility, and if I have to tear it down to get to you, so be it!
So for those new to VRChat, you may not recognize the name Lakuza, or at least that's what he thinks. So let's get to know him a little better to contextualize everything. In late 2017, Lakuza started playing VRChat, and while he was and still is an avid flat-screen gamer, especially of titles like the Dark Souls series, he had also become quite frustrated. But in his case, it was at what he was seeing in the VR industry.
I guess it really started from why I started making worlds in the first place, which was I wanted more adventure games. At the time of starting, it was mostly hangout worlds or kind of like a roleplay worlds. There were a few that attempted a form of adventure with like hiding avatars behind like hidden areas, and that kind of opened my eyes to like maybe there's a potential with like game content on here. So that's why I started making worlds, to like bring games to VRChat, which is what I would prefer to play on the platform. So I guess I'm making worlds that I would love to play if I wasn't a world creator. So yeah, that's pretty much what I make. It wasn't only just seeing worlds I wanted in VRChat, but also games that I wanted to see on VR. So a big reason for Lexarian being a thing was also because I was getting frustrated with the big companies not committing to like big experience in VR, and I was getting tired of like games being like 2 hours long. So I was like, I'm just gonna make a 7-hour experience myself. Based on Final Fantasy, because Square Enix are not making a Final Fantasy in VR. At the time, they released like a fishing minigame in VR, and I was so disappointed in that. It was just, yeah, I was just annoyed. So I wanted to try creating like something that felt like an MMO in a way, with like quests and like boss battles and like giant set pieces, like scaling huge titans. And I guess, yeah, I succeeded in doing that, and that kind of set me on a path like I can actually just make this my life outside of work.
I want to highlight this because it's that mentality of turning that frustration into action that will be the trademark of all of Lakuza's work in VRChat for the rest of his world-building journey. Despite having just started exploring VRChat himself about a month prior, by early 2018, with no game engine or Unity experience, Lakuza decided that he would make adventure games a reality in VR, specifically in VRChat, in a way that would far surpass what he had seen up to that moment. That's not to say that there were no adventure games, or no games in VRChat in general, but he was clear on what specific experiences he wanted to see more of, and so he decided he'd simply make them himself. Why? Because he wanted to inspire others to make them as well.
Impact-wise, I'd love to just inspire more creators, just like new people to join the world creator community. Because ultimately, I want to play adventure worlds as well. And one disadvantage I have to make in them is that I can't experience them as a new player. So I'm always hoping that the worlds I make inspire people. Like, hey, if I can make a world, they can make it.
And so he did. Eventually, he made quite a few, in fact. The most famous of which is probably The Devouring, alongside Cyan Laser, who focused on all things dev and tool creation, Fiona, who tackled a lot of modeling, logic, and puzzle creation, and Legends, who mainly worked on music but also provided that famous piano puzzle. But looking at the upcoming Bullet Time Agent, or BTA, as it stands now, is it worth the hype? Let's break it down and get a better sense for what this game will be. While of course there may be similar games on VRChat, I'm particularly blown away by the scope, scale, and polish of BTA. First, let's look at some of the initial impressions by playtesters. When asked about people's reactions, Lakuza said they've been incredibly positive. As for the scale, well, Lakuza went full out on jamming as much content as he possibly could and admitted that he ended up completely underestimating the playtimes he expected to see. In a tweet back in October, he pretty much confirmed his ideas of having created an actual standalone game instead of a VRChat world.
I'm even like referring to Bullet Time differently now. It's like you'll see in like the trailer, I kind of emphasize that it's a VRChat game and not a VRChat world anymore. So I'm just think this is a kind of an evolution of that, because there's so much content back in this one now, where I feel confident enough to say that it feels more like a game than a world.
What times did Lakuza end up seeing? Well, at the time of writing this, all playtesters involved had passed the 8-hour mark on story mode. Some finished as quickly as 8 hours and a half, while others, like Fiona, finished the story mode in a little over 23 hours. I reached out to Fiona to get her impressions as a playtester, because she technically isn't the target audience for this game, and both Lakuza and Fiona have been very impressed at her findings. She shared that she initially was anxious about possibly not liking her very good friend's game, something Lakuza was ready for and wouldn't have minded at all. In fact, it would have been understandable, as she explained that she doesn't normally play these games, ergo not the target audience. It's for this reason that I think it was a very wise choice to include her as a playtester, along with Lakuza's usual crowd, because it means more diverse feedback. She shared that she actually ended up enjoying the game so much that she may want to check out some of the other games that inspired BTA. She also praised and emphasized Lakuza's skills as a game designer. Beyond his obvious mastery of modeling and animation, she pointed out his ability to make players feel a certain way through his level design. This element of level design is something we will return to later on in more detail. Lakuza didn't just pack as much content as possible into this game. He made sure the content was valuable and polished, and for that, he also invested money into hiring voice actors, buying assets like sound effects and licensing music. These elements made Bullet Time his most expensive work yet. But when you listen to this game, it's well worth it. Although Lakuza also used a very cool resource, which was a sound pack by GDC that is free to use even in commercial projects. You'll find the link in the description below. However, not every sound was available through an asset pack, and in this case, he ended up having to play around with some audio to create the effects he was looking for. It really shows the attention to detail that went into all aspects of this game. While the voice acting is in English, Lakuza wanted to expand the game's reach in a number of ways, one of which was through localization, but this would be his most ambitious collaboration with volunteer interpreters yet. In order to make BTA available in 7 languages, he not just reworked his entire workflow, but he created new tools and tackled technical challenges as they became apparent, like needing language-specific fonts and managing the limited space available for subtitles and tutorials in his designs. I want to flag something that we will revisit later on, which is Lakuza's ability to 10x his efforts by creating tools that help make the work efficient and effective. As for the volunteers, I thought they were all pretty cool, and I was so grateful to be part of the team. Another huge part of making this game more widely accessible was making it available on standalone quests. He didn't just put in the work to make this game as small and optimized as possible for PC. He also made standalone quest compatibility possible in the form of smaller worlds that break the game up in parts. On launch, we'll be seeing the first part of the game available on standalone quest. As for the rest of it, it will become available during 2025. So, what should you expect from Bullet Time Agent? According to Lakuza, this game is meant to be a superhero origin story, and you should expect to get your ass kicked.
There's one thing I'm proud of with this world, the sort of free boss battles, the way they kind of handle things in very different, like the scale of them is so different. So I think people who have enjoyed my boss battles in VRChat, I think they'll really enjoy this because I think I've improved on every aspect from my past battles because I'm super excited about what I made. They will kick your ass, but I hope you enjoy the ass kicking as well.
This game is not only turning out to be one of the largest, if not the largest, extremely polished and optimized games in VRChat, playtime-wise, but it may also be one of the longest production times I've personally ever heard of, given when the idea first came to life, and that it has had over 3 years of active production time. Now, unlike The Devouring, or even JSR Festival, this gargantuan piece of work is his solo project, with some technical support from friends. So now that we have a little better understanding of this game and some of Lakuza's reasons for starting his world-building journey, how about we get off the hype train and meander a bit on how it is that we even got here in the first place. Let's turn our attention now to what pieces of BTA can currently be found on VRChat and why they came to be. Lakuza Lounge. Following his published works, we find elements of BTA as far back as 2019 in the music world called Lakuza Lounge. This world is a soft prequel to BTA, with hidden elements and characters that hint at lore and the upcoming game. But was this always the case for this music world?
No, it started off just as a music sharing hangout world. Like the story section was added in quite late. Like the outside area, you couldn't even explore that. But there was an event when I showed it off, and everyone wanted to jump out the window and explore the streets because it was visible, but I just hadn't given access to it. And seeing people really want to explore the rest of the environment kind of motivated me to like expand on it more. And that's when I started like feeding more of the story into it, and then kind of my feature creep kind of set in. But that's when I started like connecting it to Bullet Time Agent and kind of setting it up as a kind of like a light prequel to that world, and feeding elements into it.
So if this wasn't originally a prequel to BTA, why did he build this world in the first place? And why did I bring it up? Well, remember, I'm really interested in the mindset behind the world building, and this world speaks to Lakuza's philosophy on creating more of what you want to see. Lakuza Lounge wasn't just a music world. Reading his dev notes, I felt like it was a bit of a statement. It embodied some of his opinions and preferences on the topic of music worlds available at the time. My takeaway from this is that instead of just making a social media post stating his views on these worlds, he actually went out and made one himself. I asked Lakuza if sharing his take on things mattered so much that he'd actually be bothered to build a music world to get them across.
I guess it does. It's more so that I want to see that kind of content again. So it's like, if it doesn't exist, I want to show people that it's possible, with the hopes that it does inspire, like, you know, existing or new creators to try something out. If I complain about something, or if I think something's missing, the end goal is to inspire someone. So the best way to do that is to just show a working example of it. There are cases where I can't make something happen, like for example, like Spookality and like the changes I would want to make for that. I can't make my own official event, so that's something I would create a thread about and provide examples of what I think will be good fixes. But if there's a world that I can make that could address that, then sure. Although I don't think it would, when something's I guess this world for example is quite critical of what I thought of Hangout Worlds at the time. But at the same time, this was a short form project compared to most of my stuff. So this world took me about maybe 2 to 3 months at most. I would not want to commit 2 years to a world like this, because the stuff that I want to inspire are much grander in scale. So I want to inspire people to make big adventure content so I can play them. So I'm fine committing long years for that, because that's what I want to see ultimately.
Is it working?
No. It's not working too well. Turns out it's very difficult to make these.
I think it's easier to tear people down online than it is to speak with the purpose of inspiring positive change. I like the thought, the goal is to motivate, despite the jokes about it not working. So, what is the origin of Bullet Time Agent? 2018, the demo. As it turns out, a few veteran VRChat players may remember the first time they ever heard of Bullet Time Agent, all the way back in 2018. This was before Lakuza even published his first epic adventure world, Luxurian World. In contrast to the vibrant characters and interesting storyline we find in BTA today, the first iteration of Bullet Time Agent didn't even have a story. In fact, when we look at what it took to get what we see today, it's almost comical to compare the end product with the early stages, not because of the quality, but because of Lakuza's expectations for this project. Before it was even called BTA, Lakuza would refer to this as the New Small World Project, and expected to publish the experience very soon. In 2018, inspired by a collection of scripts called Final IK, Lakuza wanted to explore one specific script that would slow down the entire engine at runtime in a VRChat world. From this experimentation came the concept of a game with no story at all, in which you slowed down time to get past enemies, dodged hazards, and solved puzzles. This was meant to be his next project after he would have published his first world in January of 2019. In true Lakuza fashion, he wasted no time going from idea to action, first tweeting about this project as early as November 28, 2018, and with a little over a week of dev time, he first presented the world in the VRChat community meet that Sunday, December the 9th.
Okay, so there's a good chance that some of you or all of us may crash. I'll explain the world here before we go in. So I started, I don't know, it's been just a little over a week now. I'm basically making a bullet just over, I think I started last Tuesday, I think it was. So I'm working on basically a bullet time action platformer. I'm modeling everything myself in texturing, so all the environment, all the enemies I've made from scratch. And so far it's only most of the first half is in there, and after that you'll hit a to be continued one. But if you do reach the end of the demo, essentially there's a nice surprise for you at the end. So when you go in, you can start playing straight away. There's 2 devices in front of you when you spawn in, and if you're using the VR one, you just want to press the trigger to slow down time. Hopefully we don't crash. Okay.
At a whopping 36 megabytes, the environment was done in a day and the final boss animation in half a day. It had a proper beginning, middle, and end, and a very positive reception from the community in previews. Looking back at Lakuza's demo, I thought some people could have considered this extremely close to being complete, and if it was released, it probably would have been a popular world. When I mentioned this, Lakuza reiterated that he didn't want to release the world until it was complete with the final boss and everything. But as other projects were being worked in the meantime, his skills kept improving, and with each new project completed, BTA looked worse in comparison.
Well, all that stuff now is like the stuff that I've just done. Like, it's just part of the process of learning. So back on SDK 2, it was really simple. A lot of it was just animator logic and very simple like SDK 2 logic. The characters weren't even moving around. Like, I hadn't even understood nav mesh at that point, which is like how characters move around on surfaces. So they were literally just animated purely by animation, like moving around, so to give you the illusion that they're moving, but they've really got a set patrol pattern. But most of the robots were just stationary, they just stood in one place. No, I didn't even use timeline banner because it wasn't available to us. That was only a couple of years later when that got added. So enemies that moved were on a very fixed patrol pattern that didn't react to the player, and then I think like 80% of the robots were just static, like they were just on the same position, but I just had scripts that looked at the player, so I just utilized that as the main way to target players. And that built up like animation systems. So I was kind of good at like animation systems at that point, because like Luxarian, I had a boss battle that was handled entirely by the animator. So like I'd already had some experience that way. So the jump to SDK 3 was a bit daunting, because like this is obviously going into more programmer heavy stuff, but luckily it became really easy to figure out thanks to Sign Trigger. I literally had a separate world which I called the workshop. And it's kind of like, I just treated it like the inventor's workshop kind of thing. So I just test enemies in there and keep testing logic, trying them out in game and seeing how it works. So that was really beneficial to me, and it's kind of like really fun using that as my sort of like test bed area. Yeah, it's just every enemy, robot, every like bullet pattern, every kind of major mechanic, like, because I have combo system that I kind of developed entirely myself as well. So there's a lot of systems that I ended up just kind of understanding how to make it. So that was the place where I experimented on explosions and all, or when things went wrong. But yeah, it's just, I guess 3 years of working on this project, I got to the point where I can just make an entire dynamic boss battle on my own, and to the degree that I don't think I've seen in VRChat. I'm very confident with the boss battles I made in this. Like, I'm super happy with them, that I was able to just build logic for enemies, so now they're using nav mesh like AI like features, so they can react to you, your position, they can change positions, they'll frequently change to randomize points that I've allocated across the map, they'll change, you know, when they want to reload and stuff. There's like so many things going on now, the enemies are so much more complex.
I wanted to get a better sense of what or who inspires and motivates him to somehow keep going when dumping a project or even releasing it early was always an option. I'm sure we could all relate to someone who has a long list of half-done projects collecting dust, or projects published early just to get it out of the way and be done with it. I wanted to better understand what was going through Lakuza's mind when the project was still new, and what the overall creator environment was like. Was it an inspiring and motivational space to be in?
I guess just mostly just like, obviously with the creators that I was like close friends with, like Silent Laser, Fiona, Legends, like I've kind of like started my world journey alongside many creators, so I always look to everyone around that time. And I think just a lot of creators that joined the kind of like generational wave that I was part of, we all had very similar ideas of like really trying to push interactivity. So yeah, it's kind of like a shared goal almost with those creators. But there were creators that were kind of like, I guess, the experts in the community at the time when I joined, and they really helped me, even though they might not be active anymore. So there's one world creator called Xenu. It's like, it spells as Xenu, and he was doing some kind of like adventurous, kind of horror-ish worlds at the time as well, but he was pretty like important in my like development stage of like learning the Unity engine at the time. So I'll always remember him even if he's not around on VRChat anymore. But I guess in recent sort of times, there's a few creators that I really enjoy their work. So recent examples like True Aquasite, who does a lot of puzzle worlds. What world was it? Rupert's Tune, I think it was. That world blew me away. Like, I enjoyed that world so much. It was like a 7-hour long puzzle world. Yeah, and I just had a lot of fun with that. So yeah, I always look forward to his new worlds when they come out.
How did he feel about BTA as it started to get delayed? And as time passed and other projects became a priority, how was he able to hold on to this project for so long?
I guess I was like always passionate about it enough to always have it on the back burner. Yeah, it's a really weird one because like even when I made the prototype, I wasn't that like serious about it back then. I definitely had grand plans for it, but as it kind of sat in the background between projects, and I kept thinking about it, and just the potential of it kept growing in my head. I guess it kind of grew that way, and always also just seeing no one else had really attempted it, despite it being quite easy to figure out the mechanics on the developer side of points. No one had really explored it as like an adventure game. There had been some worlds that had kind of done something similar after like my prototype kind of, but yeah, it's just no one had really pushed it into like a game like I had in mind. So it was always in the back of my mind that way, and I guess it helped that I kept going back to it straight after finishing a project. So whenever I said like I moved on to like the next project to help with like burnout or something, it was usually bullet time agent. So it's like I always had something to do, and I guess gradually it was kind of like a showcase of my current skill level for world creation. So it was always fun and exciting that way. I wasn't really bound by anything creatively. Like if I was making like a fan game, I've kind of locked myself to the rules of the original game, or if it's like a specific mechanic or something. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like really free with this project. So yeah, it just kind of grew and grew, and something I could keep coming back to.
Lakuza explained that in between projects, he would frequently work on BTA. Whenever he felt particularly stuck or burnt out on a current project, it was back to BTA. Now, while that sounds like a great way to keep building, even if at a slower pace, something was about to change in VRChat, and it could potentially stop his project in its tracks. This was the case for many VRChat world creators during this time. Some completely stopped making things for VRChat, and others went as far as pulling their work from the platform in protest to the change that was implemented that year. This was about to be Lakuza's biggest challenge so far, but it was also when he decided to fully commit to this project, more resolutely than he ever had before. He was able to do so thanks to a number of things. First and foremost, because he was his own biggest critic. And almost equally important was the existence of a key tool provided by a very good friend just when he needed it the most. This was what Lakuza calls the reset year. VRChat's change from SDK2 to SDK3 for avatar and world building. This was when Lakuza chose to scrap all of his work. Being able to keep yourself accountable to your own goals is important. Having friends that support that mentality is also vital.
So when I finally got done with JSR Festival, and by that point, that was because JSR Festival was my first SDK-free project. I kind of enjoyed what I had access to on SDK-free, but I didn't know how to do any of it manually because I just have no experience with coding, so it's kind of daunting. So originally I was gonna stick with SDK2 and carry on with bullet time because I already had like an hour of content already on SDK2. I really just needed to tie it up with what I had in mind as the final boss. So I had like a couple of areas to do. So I would have finished it a lot earlier if I stuck with the SDK2 one. But after JSR Festival, I just felt like that project wasn't a good indicator of my skill level anymore. It kind of felt like a downgrade if I went back to that after doing stuff like the Devouring JSR Festival, even working on Magic Heist with Pins and Cyan. Like, at least visually, it would have been a huge downgrade because it was using art assets that I'd made in like 2019, and I'm such a different person now compared to then. Like 2019 was the start of me learning Substance Painter. That's how basic I was back then. So yeah, it's kind of irritating to be limited to that. And also, I'd done things like cutscenes and story content a bit more now, and bullet time was a bit too basic for my tastes. And on SDK2, there were things that I wanted to do that I couldn't really achieve. So around kind of like autumn, winter of 2021, I was talking to Silent Laser like about some of the things that I wish I could do, or like trying to figure, like we were discussing potential of like taking it to SDK free and me using his sign trigger stuff, and it was just kind of like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the project. And then my birthday in 2021, like pretty much end of the year, December, a bunch of friends basically took me like to a surprise world, and it was based on a land, so it's like imagine another street. It's set in this world, so it's very dark, rainy, cyberpunkish, and then they're like locked garage doors that open up, and each one had like a gift from a different person that they'd made. But like I got like a cool cyberpunk like samurai blade from one that they'd modeled. I had like a new avatar and like a really cool style. I had some like artwork done for me. Silent Laser's garage door opened, and he'd basically recreated all my systems from SDK2 in Sign Trigger. and he basically had like a little demo where I could kill the robots. Like he tried to recreate the kind of systems as much from like the enemy point, so it looked pretty like a good replication of what I had. And then after you kill the robots, it basically said bullet time agent udon unlocked. Those are like the things like, yeah, here's the things that you can jump straight into SDK3 and leave SDK2 behind. So at that point, like I was like, wow, like he basically kind of like kickstarted me into SDK3. So I was like, I didn't really have much of a reason to stay on SDK2 anymore because everything that I had is achievable now on this. And at that point, I was like, this is probably a good point to just erase everything I've done and restart with my new skill set. So even though I'd already spent like maybe a year's worth of development on that project, I scrapped it all and jumped to SDK3 and started remodeling everything, redesigning everything, making a more coherent story. So even though I had like a prequel already done in the lounge world, the story was like almost non-existent in bullet time. It was kind of like, yeah, I just tied the story to like a non-existent story world essentially. So once that world comes out, all that new story you get now is that completely like story I came up with a jump to SDK3. But yeah, that was pretty much like the big reset for that project. Yeah.
Many people describe Lakuza as a one-man army and a genius. I found that when I've spoken to other world builders, they sort of disregard certain topics when I mention his work as an example because he's different, or the challenges that they face don't count for the Lakuzas of the world. But since having shared those perceptions with Lakuza, I asked him about his take on them. He said that he just works hard and doesn't stop. I think this view of him being a one-man army or a genius is counterintuitive to his goal of inspiring people to make bigger and better things. So I want to make it clear that he also has challenges and needs workarounds and help from other people just like anyone else. But he has an insane drive to work longer and harder than the average person. That, I think, is undeniable. What Lakuza does best is employ a combination of discipline, stark self-awareness of his skills and limitations, and has the ability to leverage his drive to find tools, workarounds, and solutions for problems that he can't solve by himself. He also has the ability to completely focus and disappear into his own bubble and only focus on his work for as long as it takes. I asked Lakuza about how much he made all by himself on BTA and about his current skill set.
So like visually, like modeling wise, character environment stuff, that's entirely me. Design wise, story wise, writing wise. Most of the logic is done by me, but Cyan Laser had a big hand in making the kind of like starting systems. So those systems have been customized a lot now to what I need after I've like learned a bit more, but it's thanks to like the initial like starter systems that Cyan Laser basically made for me. And he even made a few things after it where like I requested certain things and he would add it in. So the save system is another example of that. So yeah, Cyan Laser's definitely helped me. And then also Fiona has helped me a bit with the shader side. So there was some shader stuff. Again, shader stuff I can't figure out. So there were some shader stuff that I needed help on. So I would ask Fiona. And I'd also ask RL's1 as well. He's another world creator and he's also on the VRChat team. He actually helped me a crazy amount with shader side. So whenever you see all the lasers in the world, that was his shader. The entire, actually all the materials are using his shader now. So he released like a public pack of materials for like just handling like light baking and stuff better as well. So yeah, my world is like, I feel like my world's 90% his materials and like his shader stuff basically. But yeah, you'll see those three names in like the main credits of like technical assistants. So without them, it wouldn't be as good as now. Even though I do say like it's a solo world, like I owe so much to those three, and especially Cyan Laser with like the way he kind of helped me just jump to SDK3, and the fact that I'm using Cyan Trigger, which is something that he made. Like I was not looking forward to the idea of learning SDK3 using what VRChat provides. It's just I do not like the graph system, and I don't like the direct-to-code like writing system. So yeah, Cyan Trigger is what worked for me. So I'm greatly appreciative for that. Just for context, Cyan Trigger is Cyan Laser's, I don't want to say remake, it's just another way of using SDK3. So he provides like a new interface which is reminiscent of the old SDK2. So it funnels everything into like drop-down menus and the way you make references and stuff. So for me personally, I found it easier to learn basic coder stuff that way. So that's just something I think that first year of the reset, I just spent learning as much as I could. And when I got stuck, I'd ask for like pointers from Cyan Laser and Fiona, kind of like get advice on what would be the best practice here, what am I doing wrong with this. So yeah, I was really grateful for like the help I had advice wise.
Lakuza talks about competitiveness and drive.
This is where that comes from what I said earlier about being your kind of main critic and wanting to compete against yourself. If I carried on with that project I had, I would not really be competing with my previous project. I'd be making something that was held back. So that's why it was easy for me to cut that back. It's not like I was giving up on that project. It's that I was committing to spending more time on it and doing it all from scratch. So yeah, double commitment. Giving it the justice it needs. Yeah.
He really believes that a lot of his achievements are more so due to his approach rather than the many skills he has developed through the years. So, before we keep talking about the technical timeline for BTA, let's take a quick detour to better understand the mindset behind the work. Let's explore Lakuza's background to see when and how he developed his need to deliver bigger and bigger projects, no matter how long it takes, and how he earned the respect of those that perhaps doubted him.
So I guess I've always been more on the art side of things, but with a focus on creating stories. So one of the first things I wanted to do as like a kid in school, I wanted to be an author. So I would always be writing like stories that I thought were awesome at the time, and like I was like, oh, this could be like a book when I'm older. So I'd always be writing short stories, and I'd be that one kid in the English class where you set the homework of writing a short story. People would come in with like an A4 piece of paper. I would come in with like 15 pages of a short story instead. So I just got really passionate about creating stories. And then I was the same with like art. I was always like ahead in the art class because I just really enjoyed doing art things and project wise. There was a point where that kind of interest dipped with just the education system and all. Like when I was getting towards the end of my teenage years, I was starting to like focus less and less on it. But it's because I found a passion of making animations and games in my spare time. So my focus was getting more into like non-school stuff, which kind of didn't help my school side of things. But luckily I didn't fail, so I still got into university, which is where I went in, wanted to go into the game industry. So I was like, let's pick programming or animation. I suck at coding, I don't know anything about it. I know art, so I went into animation for that, with the sole purpose of like wanting to be like a game designer, because I wanted to design games and like experiences. Over the course of that 3-year uni course, that was kind of like a wake-up call in a way, because like we were given kind of freedom to do these really cool projects, and that's where I kind of rediscovered my kind of competitive streak against myself, where I started kind of like committing to like insanely big projects. And early on the lecturers would be like, that's too much for the deadline. But after I proved them wrong a few times, they just learned to trust me. So I kind of got a reputation of like doing like these big projects, and I guess it was the environment was so cool. It's like you got respect for doing hard work, unlike school where you probably get bullied for doing hard work. So uni was just a great eye-opener for me. It's like like-minded people that want to learn similar things, and you kind of got respect for doing great work, so it kind of motivated that kind of behavior and like ambition to always strive for something better than what you've done before. So I think that shaped a lot of who I was, but I enjoyed animation so much that I kind of forgot about game design entirely, and my career just went straight into animation. And then, you know, like a decade later, and like VR started to kick off, and I discovered VRChat, but I had no experience in game engines because my animation career was purely in like pre-rendered stuff, so like adverts, commercials, like infomercials for companies and stuff. Kind of like the boring side of animation, I guess. But yeah, VRChat was kind of bringing my old like ambitions back. I wanted to be a game designer. So yeah, that's when I plunged into like world design.
I definitely related to Lakuza's university experience. The sense of autonomy to create your own path and to not be punished for caring about the work you do can be very validating. You can't expect people to trust you blindly, however. It's important to prove to yourself and others that you will show up when you say you will. So if there are people doubting your skills at some point, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. They just don't know what you're capable of just yet, or maybe looking out for you or the health of the team project you're working on. Conversely, you should also vet where you decide to put in your best work. Make sure your efforts are placed where they matter. Even if he had a little bit of struggles during school, he did enough to be able to get to that university experience, where he then went full in and demonstrated a lot of self-discipline and intense work ethic. With a combination of interest and skills, Lakuza has been able to craft games that are immersive in a way that draw you in by using intentional design that feels personal to you, but also give you breathing room so you can bring your own experience to the story as the main character. These are two techniques that stood out to me, and I'd like to share my takeaways and interpretation of how these design choices are felt in a couple of his worlds. Part of this is just what he has plainly stated, and of course some of this is also my observed experience as a player. It was very interesting to see how these different points of view stacked up to each other. Let's explore storytelling and the emotional connection that can be achieved through plot, language, and level design. I'd like to quickly explain some of Lakuza's intentions for the game and how they matched up with my own experience as a player. I was able to identify two key components for this balanced formula that Lakuza later confirmed as we talked. I consider this formula a mix of specificity and vagueness, in which the language is customized but the story is open. It was awesome to listen to him explain what he wanted to achieve and notice that those things were the same things that stood out in my own experience, which speaks to how successful he was in achieving those goals. We already heard about one of these from Fiona when she shared her thoughts on Lakuza's capability to create an emotional response through level design. So let's start there. Storytelling and emotional impact through level design, the benefit of vagueness. In this part, the takeaway is that less is more, that you have to understand where to trim the fat in your work and be intentional. What is the desired user experience? That determines your design choices. For the amount of playtime hours that people have been getting, there really wasn't all that much text to translate when it comes to dialogue specifically. And this is very important because I believe it's what a lot of new game designers unfortunately get wrong when it comes to immersive adventure games. I can't tell you how many times I had to drop off an adventure world because I was spending so much of my time just reading massive walls of text and trying to keep up with an overly complicated plot that didn't really help me feel a deeper connection to what was happening around me. It's important to understand that you can affect a player's emotions without talking to them through creative and effective level design. A narrative immersive experience doesn't always need an explicit story in your face. As interesting as I found some of the characters' personalities and a bit of the overall plot, it's really not that deep on Bullet Time Agent because it's not meant to be. You can bring depth to the story by letting your mind find ways in which it connects to the plot. The game should help you do that through specific tools that make you feel like you're being pulled in. Use these correctly and the player's imagination starts kicking in. Lakuza's carefully chosen brushstrokes in the form of story, intentional language, and level design help nurture the game's proposal for the player, which in this case is, you're the hero and this is your origin story.
It's actually interesting that you bring up like the whole story aspect of it as well, because like, I guess in my head I see story as also the experience itself that the player goes through in their story. One thing I kind of just realized while making these worlds is not to go too heavy on the story. I think one of the biggest things I've learned just playing other VR games and designing ones myself is like, I enjoy the experiences where the story is there, but it's not overbearing. It's kind of light, so it's like, if you want to delve into it, the story's there for you to like dig into it. Yeah, exactly. Like Souls games are such a big inspiration for pretty much every world I've done has had some kind of influence from that company. So that's one of the things I've learned. I don't want to take that away from people if I can. Like I want to let them have that freedom. So whilst I enjoy creating stories, I'm finding a new love for like more subtle stories in VR. Yeah, I'm enjoying telling more dynamic stories now through VRChat. I think that's the best way with VR, is allowing players to express themselves in some form. So creative writing wise, so I have like a background in animation, but it's mostly tied to kind of marketing level animation, so doing like adverts and then doing my own like mini short films kind of stuff. But the characters that are part of the story, they kind of spawned with this world lounge, so they were never intended to be part of Bullet Time originally. It's just something I kind of improvised as I went along, and it just made sense to tie them more in. And then when it came to the restart with Bullet Time, I really wanted to delve more with like voice actors and having like more story focused content, so I just thought it'd be cool if I tied it to existing characters I had in another world, so it would kind of reward people that had visited my old world. For new players, it'd be like, hey, this is potentially a character to get to know, but people have been to lounge, it'd be like, oh, I maxed out friendship level with this person. It makes sense, you know, and they might understand certain references better, like the nickname that these characters call you in Bullet Time and stuff. So there's little Easter eggs I've hidden that way, so to get like the full experience, like someone who remembers, which is a tall ask because this world came out like what, 5 years now, so you know most people will have forgotten everything about this world, but if you remember some slight things about it, you might get a smile out of you once you see those references in Bullet Time. So yeah, there are some like, well no, actually I don't think I'll ever go too heavy on story. I think Bullet Time is probably the deepest I'll go with the story, just because I wanted to really create like a essentially a superhero origin movie, kind of like the Marvel movie. So you're kind of like starring your own Marvel movie in this. But whilst I don't make the main character talk, that's just up to the player to talk really. Like the characters around you will interact with you and say things. But so yeah, even bullet time, like it'll have a heavy start and a heavy end. But like when you're in the actual main part of the gameplay, you're just kind of like left unattended for like ages, and you'll have like short scenes that might take like a minute at most. But in that sense, Bullet Time Agent is the first time I've gone this deep into a story, but even then it doesn't get in your way.
My personal example for this case is Climbing Trials Colossus. Remember my frustration with games? It wasn't just the flat screen or being referred to as a strapping young man with no customization available to me. It was also all of these games that felt like I was reading a graphic novel or watching a movie instead of playing a game where my choices mattered. I didn't feel like there was much room for me to embody the main character and understand how I would feel under the circumstances presented to me in the game. That's not to say I'm a fan of absolutely sterile and plotless games that come off as more of a simulator. I absolutely love the plot-heavy and cutscene-heavy game Baldur's Gate 3, but I still want the breathing room to discover what this experience means to me as I navigate it, which by the way you can also do in Baldur's Gate 3. The cutscenes and dialogue hardly get in the way of you role-playing your own character, and where the language is specific, it's to enhance your own story as it is customized based on your choices. When I played Colossus back in 2020, I was blown away at how it felt to be the one standing there in VR. What virtual reality brought to the table that flat screen games didn't was that level of immersion in which you are no longer safely at a distance from the threats and challenges thrust upon you. And a game that probably takes advantage of this reality will play to that strength by making you act more as if you were there, in that adventure as yourself, and not as someone who's passively watching a character play through a game with your help. And that's exactly how I felt in Colossus. I couldn't criticize my character's stamina because I was the one physically moving my arms to climb. I couldn't complain about the game's movements as I climbed because I was the one deciding where I went and how. I could use my controllers to look around, or I could physically lean over a cliff to see what was down there. I don't know if you remember the first time you played a VR game. This may all sound really simple and dumb, but the first time you have that experience, it's very impactful. The game explained what it was, but it didn't tell me who I was. With the exception of some instructions on what needed to be done to move forward, it was Tropi climbing those mountains, not some character I was meant to cosplay as. How did it get an emotional response out of me? Through level design. I had challenges I needed to face, and a giant colossal enemy was standing right in front of me at one point. It didn't need words. Plus, the added benefit of playing on a social platform was that I met a stranger while I was playing. We had awesome conversations, and we tackled the world together, which added to a level of immersion and emotional investment that I just hadn't gotten in a really long time from a flat screen game. Lakuza talks about his intentions in his game design and the stories that players had shared that really warmed his heart. They were really similar to mine. So at the very end of our chat, I told him what world sparked my interest in making a creator highlight for his work in the first place, and why that was Climbing Trials Colossus.
I guess I'm just glad that you liked Colossus so much, because like the whole purpose of that world was to inspire people, because like I really wanted to capture the stress and strain that the main character feels in Shadow Colossus of climbing. I absolutely love watching someone playing it for the first time. Like seeing when people get shot up into the sky with a Titan, and like that sense of vertigo they feel. Like it's so immersive. Like I can feel their fear just watching their stream. I enjoy that so much. And then when you miss that one grab and you fall a bit, and that sort of like heart up in your mouth kind of feel. Like I'm so proud of how stressful. Like that's so weird to say, but like I'm just proud of how stressful that feels. Like I feel like I captured the stress of Shadow of the Colossus that way.
Didn't I tell you he wanted to make us suffer? Now let's turn our focus to the other side of this equation, that specificity in language. Back in Bullet Time Agent, when some of the bosses were talking to me, I remember feeling engaged and personally invested as me, not as a third person watching a character be addressed. This is intentional. Lakuza said he wants you to feel like you're the superhero main character, and this is your origin story. The reason for that is so simple that it almost feels dumb to bring it up. None of the characters referred to me as something I wasn't. None of them assumed anything about me based on anything that hasn't happened in the story. And whatever they did bring up, I couldn't deny. Yeah, I did the thing. The first instance I noticed intentional specificity in the type of language chosen was simply the fact I wasn't referred to as something like a strapping young man who was happy to cause explosions or whatever. The language was neutral about who I was and my intentions. I was questioned about the things I did in the game, told what to do, told what not to do, but in the end, it could have all been just me in a situation where I suddenly obtained powers and there was just a very light splash of a backstory that simply explained why I was there and why these people were my teammates. That's it. Now, am I reading too much into this? No. Remember, I volunteered as a translator. It was literally my job to understand Lakuza's intentions for the player through his specific choice of language. The first thing he emphasized was that he made all of the dialogue as neutral as possible to avoid gendering the main character, which is such a small and simple thing that a game designer could do for the player, and it's so accessible to do that in English. This is where I was able to see Lakuza's willingness to make his vision a reality though. He couldn't have anticipated how the nature of Romance languages could potentially detract from that original vision. In the Spanish language, which was my case, there are genders for even inanimate objects, and that gender is applied to all of the words referring to that object or person in the sentence. While I fully agreed that this neutrality was a very important element, I mentioned that there may be a case or two where I simply wouldn't be able to translate things in a neutral manner. He understood and he asked what options we had. This didn't deter him at all. A conversation that was supposed to be an onboarding to translate his finished work immediately included a bonus mini brainstorming session of new menus and methods to show players customized text. I was 100% on board and more than willing to create custom text so long as he could use it, and he did. He added a tiny bit more of scope to an already finished game for the sake of the player. I was so happy that someone would care that much about something like that. So I made sure to translate absolutely anything he set my way, including bonus stuff. What do I mean by bonus stuff? Well, Lakuza showed a lot of respect for our time as volunteers. He was very mindful of only asking for help where it was absolutely crucial, and understood we all had different circumstances and time constraints. I just so happened to take on doing 100% of the text with a few extra lines for customization purposes. The experience was super positive and the language teams were super cool and friendly. I think all of this speaks to Lakuza's focus on the user experience above all. Even though his boss battles are designed to kill you a million times and he wants people to feel immersed while they suffer. Now I think it's important that we also look at the practicalities of this project and how Lakuza focused on what was impactful yet accessible to him within reason. While some major challenges were worth the work and the struggle, others simply weren't. You might remember that he mentioned the support of friends, mentors, and the limitations he had around shaders and coding. I want to reiterate that there were some challenges that were just not worthwhile.
It is easy that all of it is local. I'm not doing any complex sync stuff. So like the world is very simple. Like I think if an actual program were to look at the things I'm doing, they'd probably figure it out and code it really quickly. So I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I've made something super complex. It's probably really simple. But yeah. I guess I chose the right things to tackle and the right things to avoid. So not having to deal with network sync was a big plus.
He focused where he was most impactful according to what he wanted. That means no group sync. It's all you, your fights, your victories, your sense of satisfaction. It doesn't detract from his vision. That was a limitation to him that he felt just wasn't worth focusing on. And I think he was right. It doesn't get in the way of his vision at all. In fact, it adds to it. He didn't want to be overwhelmed with the localization, so he made a new process and built a world where we could test how long the subtitles were before delivering our finished product. He wanted to try out all these new mechanics and different ways to experiment with the boss fights. He made this random little workshop world. He doesn't understand shaders for the life of him, so he went out and he got some really amazing asset packs from expert creators. Lakuza isn't some unreachable and unrelatable genius. As awesome and impressive as his work is, he's a very hard worker. He really loves what he does and is willing to work at it as long as it takes. And that's how he described the way that he's able to do what he does. He just doesn't stop working on it. Even if he doesn't know how it's going to be received or how he's going to face certain challenges when he gets to them, he doesn't want to hold his work back for the fear of not being able to do something.
I guess I didn't think too much about it because those things can really like put annoying blockers to a project. So I always just had the end goal in mind. I just wanted to create something cool. Like the biggest blocker would have been the jump from SDK to SDK3. I think that was my biggest concern, and that was pretty much sorted out. The ideas I had in mind were like super ambitious, like super challenging, and I was really excited to kind of like figure out how to do them. Despite like I stressed a lot about those challenges as well, and I was pretty vocal online about them when I was worried about how is this boss battle going to work. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but it just sounds so cool in my head. So while I did stress about it, I wanted to do it so much I couldn't wait to do it. Just having an idea in your head for like 3 years and finally reaching the point where you can actually get to it like 2 years later or whatever, it's a cool feeling. So I wasn't really focused on it going to waste, because like I was confident VRChat wasn't going to go away and it wasn't going to stop world creation.
I asked Lakuza what he hoped people took away from the game.
I don't know, it's hard to say. Like in terms of like lesson wise, like inspiration wise, I hope it inspires like more like action adventure stuff, because that's what this genre wise, this is like a big action adventure. But yeah, I really hope it kind of like inspires more broader genres that cover multiple genres in one. In terms of bullet time agent, some of it is like a combat heavy game with like combos and stuff. Then there's like light puzzle solving, there's like exploration stuff into it, there's like technical secrets, like there's so many different factors into it. And then you got like large scale like boss battles. So I'm hoping it can kind of like inspire people to create more like varied content within the same world itself. I think that'd be quite cool. But I think ultimately I just want to see people make more interactive content. So I hope that's the main takeaway. But on like a just, I guess, enjoyment level, I guess I really hope people feel like it doesn't feel like VRChat. That's the one thing I really like aiming for now, is making content that doesn't feel like a VRChat experience.
Lakuza shared some of his thoughts about what might be coming to VRChat with its latest changes, like adding persistence.
Even when I started with a generation of like creators with similar thoughts. The one thing I'm sad about is that number has decreased now. 2018, 2019 had so many creators that were focused on adventure content, really trying to push VRChat. And I think we've lost that number so much. We're to the point now where we get a big adventure world, we get maybe like 2 or 3 in a year. Back then, we were getting them like every other month. Like someone was coming out with something crazy, like super innovative. But yeah, now you only really get like a big adventure world, like maybe every 6 months you get one, which is kind of sad to see. So yeah, I think some of that is down to the kind of worlds we see mostly now. They don't really inspire that kind of content. Content creation is harder now than it was back then. SDK2 was a lot simpler to work with. And then people that are making large adventure worlds, and I'm guilty of this, take forever to make that adventure world. So all of those are contributing to a slower release of adventure worlds. So as a result, we've got less adventure creators. So we're all in some way, everyone's kind of to blame, me included. Yeah, the goal is just to like, inspire people to make cool stuff, but it's hard to get that inspiration if you don't know it's possible. So yeah, it's kind of like the chicken and egg thing. I think the current sort of trap that we're currently in as a community is that we're very focused on kind of one genre worlds, like let's say like an escape room world, but it doesn't really deviate much towards from that. So we're getting like access to like VRChat persistence. We're gonna start seeing a lot more games now that just aren't just like a world experience. Like you'll be going back to them constantly, whether it's like some kind of like daily reward mechanic or like some kind of level up mechanic like worlds offer. We're about to enter like a phase of like games just existing on VRChat now, so that's kind of exciting. So I guess like bullet time can be considered part of that in a way. But I think it alongside other worlds will like inspire a lot of people to make content like this, I think.
I asked Lakuza what his initial thoughts were the moment he realized he finally finished this game.
I thought my reaction would be bigger than it actually was. Like when I finished it, I just casually went to like I told like Cyan 300 Legends first. I was like, I think the world's done now. that was my like expression with it. It was just, I guess, yeah, it was weird. I was just kind of like zoned out, like yeah, it's done. But then I guess I began to like just look back and how much work I've done to get here, and then it's kind of just like a nostalgic feeling of like just the journey of coming to now. It feels so weird to finally be at this point now. It's a strange one, but I think I get like this every time leading up to the release of a world. Like nervousness starts to set in. It's like, I like it, but what if people don't like it? Oh no! And like all these thoughts start drifting in. Like, what if people really hate it? Or like, it's always the same with every world project. There's always that kind of like fear, like people might not like it as you get closer and closer to the release date. And then having to worry about like how you're gonna market it and stuff, and like hopefully people will enjoy the stuff that I post, or like there's a lot of like worry factors that are involved. So I mean it's not fully over until the world's actually out, I guess, because I have to start thinking about like the marketing side of it as well.
You don't have to be the same as Lakuza. You don't have to work in the same way. But I think that learning from other people's processes can be very inspiring and educational.
Even though I'm not a professional game designer, I'm getting to live that dream through this hobby. So I think all of that life kind of experience has kind of led me here, where I've always wanted to create big experiences and ambitious projects, and it's just translated to VRChat now, where I can kind of be creative, like freely creative, I guess. So I've got my work life where I do work for someone else's ambition. Then my personal life after work is doing stuff for my ambition. So I'm not gonna half-ass that ambition. I'm gonna go all out on what I make. And I always go in with the idea that whatever I'm working on is the last project I'm working on, and it has to be good enough that I want to be the thing I'm remembered for in case I stop making, or if I like pass away or something. That last project should be like the one I'm like remembered for. So I treat every project like that. So it has a downside of the project taking long because I'm so committed to it, but I think that's all of that kind of like personality, surroundings, and kind of like competitiveness and that ambitiousness, I guess, kind of creates that unique voice, I guess, that I have in my worlds. I hope that makes sense.
So there you have it. I'm extremely excited for the launch of this game. I'm excited for people's reactions. If someone doesn't like the game, hopefully it's an inspiration to make your own version. And if you love it, hopefully that's an inspiration too. I want to invite everyone to perhaps think about what unique and special combination of skills and personality gives them a superpower to bring something unique to the table for everyone else to enjoy. I hope you could take any crumb of inspiration or lesson from this video, and I want to give a massive thanks again to Lakuza for everything, for answering all of my questions, for providing so much content and old footage from his years of working on this project. And I hope that this could be maybe a tiny little bit of an inspiration to someone to go out and do something you're passionate about, even if you don't know if it's going to pan out, even if you're scared of having wasted time and effort in it. There's always going to be something to gain from the hard work, because that's a level up for your skills, for your capacity to put up with discomfort. There's always something to be gained. Even if no one looks at what you did, at the very least you can learn and adapt to do better next time. If you found anything useful at all, I would really love to hear from you in the comments. Thank you so much for your time. And if you're interested in a full Lakuza World highlight video, I will be working through the other hours of footage that I have from this interview, including questions about managing burnout, the stress of social media, and being perceived, along with some other stories from Lakuza. So subscribe, I guess, if you want to see that. And thank you so much for watching. We survived.